Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Ah, am I connected on here? Hi, everyone. Oh, yeah. Okay, give us a hello if you are in. There you are, my beautiful boy. Hello. Okay. Jess, hi. Gareth, hi. Robinson, hi. Carolyn, yay, there you are. There you are. You were in already, boy. Oh my gosh, so this evening we are going live with no other than Mr. Christian West. Look at you. Hello, gorgeous.
I even got fancy and put up a little thing.
So fancy.
Yeah,
Oh my
right.
gosh. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm feeling this moon. It's been very interesting. It was right on my sun. Well, it was 2 degrees off of it. So,
It's a
but
conjunction, honey. It's a conjunction.
exactly. My Virgo's like, it's gotta be really close, and it is. I mean, it's within 3 degrees. I really like a tight conjunction when I read, but yeah, I mean, and it is tight. That's pretty tight. So yeah.
I love that. I like a tight conjunction when I read. Mm.
Exactly, right. Oh,
Evening
we
all.
already
We're
going
in.
after it.
We're
Okay, I
in.
see where this is gonna take us. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm
Oh
so
my
here for it.
gosh. I so
Mhm.
love you. I so love you. And I want to invite everyone else to love you if they don't know you already. So
Yay! I'm
good
here for
evening and good
it.
afternoon over in New York.
Yeah, yeah, over in on the East Coast, it's afternoon. So yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So
So let's get everybody warmed up into the early evening Friday night juices of the Capricorn moon.
yeah.
I'm your host, Mary Kate Medicine, and this is the most beautiful country clairvoyant, Mr. Christian West,
Ah,
who you will find tickles my taste buds, gets me excited, reads astrology so uniquely, and really powerfully opened up my eyes to the way in which you can reinterpret the zodiac wheel for like not just for like the way we view astrology in the modern world, but it just is so much more down to earth the way that you view it. I love that. And when we spoke, I was like, you got to come on. You've got to come on. You've got to teach people this. You've got to show people that actually the chart interpretation isn't always the exact interpretation. There can be other views, other perspectives. And
yeah.
the things that you shared with me just dropped in so well. So I'm so glad that you are here.
Yay.
A lot of people know your account for memes and for a little bit of cheekiness.
Yes. Maybe just a little cheeky. Maybe just a little.
But now and in the future, to be teaching and to be sharing your wisdom on astrology and the way in which words are magic.
Yes, yes. So I have a class this Sunday called Your Word is Your Wand, which I stole from the Florence Scovel Shinn book. She wrote The Secret before The Secret was written in the 1920s. Rhonda Byrne also stole from
Yeah.
her.
The game of life. I love that woman. And like it's
Exactly.
tiny little thing, isn't it?
It is. It is. And Your Word in Your Wand is like it was like the follow up, but you really don't need to read that one. To me, it's the same as everything in the game of life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really loved it. So I was like, let's talk about it. Being a writer, and I find interesting enough, and you probably have too. I mean, astrologers have to learn how to be articulate and their words, especially when you're interpreting these things. And writers, of course, work with archetypes and symbols, and that's a huge part of astrology. I mean, for most of us, not everyone. I know some astrologers that are very much so about the aspects and the geometry and all of that, and I'm too Piscean to to be that exact. I'm just way too intuitive when I look at everything. So yeah, so this Sunday we're going to talk about using your words, and our bodies, because you know, was a personal trainer and really into being in the body. I think the body is the gateway to awareness if we want to use it. So yeah.
So much, I mean, already, gosh, there's so much there, so much juice there, isn't there? I find that, you know, the subjects of which I'm speaking about at the moment a lot with my peers and with my students is very much around kind of the embodiment, understanding what embodiment means. Because
Yeah.
I feel like maybe in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of information
Yeah.
around astrology and personal development and
Yeah.
spiritual awakening. So
Yeah.
everyone's very information heavy. You
Yeah.
know, we know what we know because we know it because we've known it.
Yeah.
And yet, actually, to embody it is to fully know it. And I think maybe that is actually the next step, the next evolution in astrology, in personal development, spiritual awakening, to really remember we're on Earth. We're in 3D. We ain't somewhere else, baby. We're here.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say about that?
So we've been a very mind dominant globe.
Mm.
Well, humanity has been. Let's say that. Let's not blame the globe. Let's not say it's the globe. Let's just say it's human.
Conspiracy
But
101.
yeah, right. So so humans, and you know, I had a conversation years ago with a friend who was talking about something and used the word integration, and I said, define integration for me. What does that really mean to you? And what does learning mean? What does the lesson mean? And to me, you know, I know people, and I've done it. You know, you read a book and it changes your life for 2 weeks, and like for 2 weeks you're enlightened, and you're like, oh my God, that was amazing, and then boom, like then you're done. To me, the embodiment is the practice. It is the, I won't call it a rehearsal, because rehearsal, I don't necessarily like that term. It literally points to death, like a hearse. But it is this present moment repetition, like a structure. If we even bring Saturn into it, like I think Saturn is very much so about embodiment of all of those things. So it points to, we have thoughts, we have emotions, and we have the behaviors. To me, the behaviors are the embodiment of it, because a lot of people will talk a good talk, but then they won't walk the walk, or they'll walk the walk for a little while. And so finding the balance between the talk and the walk, what's going on up here, what's been said, what's been heard, and then going forward with that. In the, what I would say the integration point is the practice. Practice makes practical. That's the root of it. So the practicality is a yeah, the
Practice
practicality.
makes practical.
Yeah, the root of the word practical, talk about, I mean, you have practice is practical.
Mm-hmm.
So the practicality of it to me is the embodiment of it. Listen to me being Capricorn under this moment. It is conjunct my sun. And this is really part of my message to the world going forward is, well, to anyone who will listen, let's say that, is the practicality of the practice and the spiritual, you know, and the consistency of that practice. Because most of us, again, we assume the spirit and the physical are separate. And for a lot of people starting this practice, even getting into astrology or whatever, they're looking for the thing. They're looking for even enlightenment, the escape, the fix my life, the do all of that. And then it's like, no, darling, you're the fixer upper of your own life. You know, like
Yeah.
you do the demo day, you know, you do the remodel, you do all of those things. So again, going back to the embodiment and the physical of it, they're not separate. And I really want to emphasize that, because in our world we separated them. A lot of people have.
Yeah. We did, and you know, I think like you know, we can see here. I think the next evolution is to use that word, integrate them both, and to
Mm-hmm.
allow ourselves to have both the mind and the body, and actually not even just to have both of them, but to realize that the body is the mind,
Yeah.
you know, that the body is the mind. We have these 50 trillion cells that are all conscious, talking and
Yeah.
responding and working. And we think this lump that we're sat here in is one entity. And actually, it's like this community of minions that are running around, like getting us from A to B and from one thought to another thought and from one place to another place.
Yeah.
And unless we start to kind of use it in that way, and you said right at the beginning, astrologers have learned to articulate what it is that they're seeing through this language,
Yeah.
because we need to land the message with whoever it is that we're reading for.
Yeah.
And so we're having now, or not having, we're getting to learn about things like embodiment, biology, physics,
Hmm.
chemistry, you know, mythology, anthropology. Being an astrologer is no longer looking at a natal chart and saying, you know, you've got Venus in Capricorn, so that means this.
Yeah.
It's a whole healing art, and actually that kind of really looks back at why astrology came in the first place, what it was used for in the very beginning, looking at the skies, charting,
Yeah.
you know, what was going on in nature and the Great Mother, and how that was being interpreted through the human being and the community of human being.
Yeah. And
So
my go ahead, finish your thought. Finish your thought.
I was going to ask a question, so bring it in because I'll ask that after.
So I like what you pointed out, because my thought is, if we're in this community and everything's connected, then certainly so is the solar system. You know, certainly so is you know, the planets and our place within it. You know, to me that just makes common sense. And again, the humans have a habit of compartmentalizing everything.
Yeah,
And it's a control measure. I think it's been done very much so unconsciously, motivated by that need for to be the authority in some capacity, as most humans think they need to be. So
yeah.
humans want to be the center of the universe, because if we're not that important, then why are we here?
Absolutely. And, you know, as I was about to say, which is really perfect as we move in, is so if we are kind of as a species, as a community, as a collective humanity, moving towards integrating, you know, or bringing together, holding together all of these different lineages of understanding. So, for example, the biology, the physics, the anthropology, the history, whatever it may be, bringing
Hmm.
it all into one place. Is that now this healing is the new high? Is that now culminating in this space where humans are actually becoming aware that we have been through what we now term as trauma, or let's just call developmental energies,
Hmm.
developmental situations, events that have brought us to a place that we get to heal, quote unquote, or shift into this new place of higher consciousness.
Yeah.
And all of these energies are coming together, and astrology is really being kind of mystically at the forefront, along with things like epigenetics, for example,
Mhm.
or you know, spiritual development. But astrology is really leading the way at the moment in this, let's call it the gateway to healing, the gateway to enlightenment.
Yeah. Um, so if we look at the word healing, before I launch into that, again, the root of the word healing simply means whole. That's it. The word trauma simply means wound.
Yes.
And I think of trauma in the mind as creating conflict in some way. So I point to that. So as far as astrology is concerned, and a lot of the other healing arts, and also throwing in there, we have a lot of information on any number of different spiritual practices, whether that's Celtic or the Afro-Indigenous ones that have been rising to the surface over the years, through the reclamation
Mm-hmm.
of Black people claiming their ancestry, all these things coming to the forefront, and integrating, connecting with science as well. They're not separate. We're finding out again. Astrology to me is a tool for self-inquiry, and
Mm-hmm.
and and the self-inquiry is what brings the wholeness, because that we look inside and we look at where the conflict lies. We look at where we resist and fight against ourselves, and then we we look at what maybe those adversarial circumstances are in life. Like, hey, I don't mean to roast people, but I do all the time when I read
Yes.
them. I'm like, okay, here's your challenge. But I also, when I look at things, okay, here's the gift.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the here's your Excalibur, so to speak, to face the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or here's how you ride the dragon. Because sometimes
Yes.
it's not about defeating the dragon. Sometimes it's about learning to ride the dragon and use it. For some people, it might be about defeating it. It depends on the person, the place, and the time. But so to me, it's come to the forefront, I think, because it does feel concrete. It looks and acts like a scientific method in a lot of ways. It is that kind of bridge between astronomy and spirituality, so to speak. We're looking at the
Mm.
celestial bodies and their influence. Um, and it has ages worth of history that go with it, which I like because my Capricorn loves a little tradition. But I have other aspects that want to break it apart. That wants to break from tradition a little bit, and allow the opportunity to just see things differently. Again, going into my practice of self-inquiry, my own stories, my own history, my own tradition, my own conditioning, and deconstructing it. So I
Mm.
think astrology gives us the opportunity to deconstruct, um, and can point us in a direction. I also want to say this, though. A lot of the spiritual teachers, including myself, will say it's not, you might come to a point where it's not necessary, because how much do we control or influence, not control, but influence the planet's movements, and how much do they influence us? So is the planetary movements in astrology just part of the matrix, so to speak, or if we use the Buddhist term, the ocean of samsara, where we come in algorithmically, are reborn, and astrology points to the algorithm. But my thought is every great challenge or adversity comes with its own gift and tool, like I said. So if it is the algorithm, then we get the opportunity to rewrite the program, regardless of what the planets are doing.
And I love that. I mean, that is so where I sit in this perception as well. Working with astrology, but also working with kind of this mindlessness.
Yeah,
I love, like, take the mind out of this and work with what your soul curriculum is that's coming up, regardless of what else is going on, regardless of all the meaning that you're pulling from everywhere.
yeah,
Move into your own wholeness, which is, like you said, the root of healing.
yeah,
Um, and what I loved when we first spoke was the way in which you interpreted, though, the zodiac, the astrological wheel, because
yeah,
we look, as humans, we look for meaning. We look out there for meaning, and we look in here for meaning. And we all know that line. There is no meaning unless it's the meaning that you give it. And it's a great cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true.
yeah.
And we get to give meaning to what it is that we're experiencing, so that we can feel the way we wish to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And you
About
blew my mind.
responsibility. Yeah,
Yeah. But you blew my mind because we were talking about my chart, and there was some interesting um there were some interesting interpretations in there, but then you were like, yeah, but the fourth house this, and yeah, actually, did you even know that the first house is this? And I'm like, Shit, bitch. What are you slapping me around like this for? Come on. So we talked about you teaching this, and I wanted to introduce this a little bit tonight around kind of what do you see if meaning is, you know, what we make of it, the meaning that we give something. Tell us about the way that you see the chart that is different to the way others have seen it and how you kind of started to move into that direction.
So I think it's a so number one, I had a very unique teacher who I'm actually living with now. You know, she was a good friend of my mom and taught me a lot. And you know, and she worked in a metaphysical bookstore. And oh, I had a whole crew in my teen years. I came up here for a trip and had a whole crew of people just read my chart and do all these things. And so for me, part of it's just that, and then connecting different dots. But that's a loaded question because there are 12 houses and, you know, a lot of planetary influences and, you know, it's a highly nuanced system that still I feel like I still learn about and connect
Mm,
dots, and I'll look at someone's chart or even my own and have a revelation about a planetary aspect in relationship usually with something else, because it's all in relationship, right?
yeah.
That community that you said,
And
that
we don't
community.
usually check it unless we've got something going on in a relationship, and then we go, let's dive back in there.
Yeah, some people, but that goes back to that spiritual practice, right? I can't help but practice it when I have people show up to look at their chart, you know. It's for me, it's just a weekly, sometimes daily event. But you know, so if we want to focus on two aspects very quickly that I you know that people have kind of wrestled with, I think number one, I read differently for people who are over the age of 40. I
Hmm.
find that 40 is late 30s, early 40s is a turning point or an opportunity for a turning point.
Hmm.
And usually at this point in time, and usually in our late 30s, we gain a lot of perspective. You know, it's the, oh my God, that's my mom's voice kind of coming out, or oh my God, that's my dad, or I've turned into my mom or my dad, or something like that starts to happen in the late 30s. Yeah. We start to have these revelations and we start to maybe understand and connect some dots. So
Mm.
I find that people over 40 have usually have addressed, especially if they've been running their, looking at their chart for years, they probably addressed a lot of things.
Hmm.
So the birth chart to me is important, but not as important as the transits often, because the birth chart is your baseline of your operating system, but there's a good chance that due to the transit impact that it's changed that over the years, and you've grown and
Hmm.
you've evolved. So I like to consider all of that. And you know, and we could go through each house in my thing, but that would take a whole, you know, probably an hour or 2 hours, or
It's
you
your
know, a
workshop.
series of class, yeah, workshop that yeah, we you and I talked about me doing. So
Yeah.
so it's on the list. But I'll say the ascendant to me, because it's so connected to the first house, and it's you know, or it can be, um, you know, it kind of sets off. They say that that's the ruler of our chart. I say yes to some degree, because again, it's remarkably nuanced. So I find the ascendant is oftentimes how we think we should show up in the world based
Mm.
on other people's perceptions, oftentimes pointing to our conditioning. So me being a Cancer rising, of course, my chart's really interesting because I have Mars in direct opposition and the Sun to my rising. So I have, you know, I've struggled with that Cancer Capricorn thing. But most people go, oh my God, you're so fucking emotional. And they can't handle it, or they find me super intense. Well, I also have a Venus in Scorpio, so in the fifth house. So that might
That's the
contribute.
intensity,
Yeah,
honey.
that might contribute some of it. But I'll say this: I was conditioned to be the nurturer, to be the caregiver, to be, you know, this mother figure, which has served me.
Mm.
To your point in the development of it, but at some point in time, I've had to give it up and go. I need to look at this differently than how it was conditioned into me. And I have. I've always been very connected to the moon, and so I get all of that. But as I have progressed, the other aspect that might surprise a lot of people in today's discussion that I think is really important and very vital is the midheaven. I think the midheaven is so important. And I find that that's how people really want to show up in their life. Not the ascendant, the
It so
midheaven.
is.
And I'll tell you, my mom has a Capricorn fucking midheaven, and my dad was a Capricorn. She had a Capricorn baby. Her and yeah, we could bring in the nodal axis as well to this because that brings in more of the nuance. But I find the midheaven has a lot more influence than people give it credit for. Certain, not everyone, but certain astrologers and certain people. So by the time that someone turns 40, I tend to go towards that north node. Although I'll say this, there's been a little bit of a shift. I've read for a lot of people in their early 30s are just hitting their Saturn return, and I find that generation is having an opportunity, some of them, to move into their north node a little early, and that
Oh, I
midheaven.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
I
And
found.
anyone watching, we should invite them to pop in. What is their midheaven if they
Yeah, what
know,
is
or
your
their
midheaven? And
ascendant?
then and my story is unusual because my south node is conjunct my midheaven, and then it's opposing, of course, my north node. So, and that might be my impetus to look at the importance of it.
Hmm.
But I find that, interestingly enough, if you have a north node that's floating out in bumblefuck and nothing's aspecting it, I find that most people, the place to go is the midheaven,
Yeah.
and to look there to be kind of a guiding light potentially for you. And for me, it's Pisces. So I'm showing up as this very Pisces spiritual person.
Yeah.
And then realize that I really was that way as a child as well. Again, my story's a little weird. I have Neptune to square it. So, that doesn't, so I have a very direct aspect to it. But I still find that most people, in their expression, when we incorporate the element of the midheaven into the nuance of it, I'm like, this is part of your North Star. This is kind of how you want to be with people. And my mom really has struggled to be that Capricorn. And I think that's so fascinating to me. I've looked at her development over the years and been like, oh, you had teachers. You really struggled. You wanted to be that Capricorn. You wanted to show up in that way.
Yeah.
But it's been difficult because she reverts back to her Taurus ascendant every time. I need my comfort. I need to feel safe. I need to, yeah. And
So
sometimes, yeah,
what you're saying, because this is what I'm hearing, so I want to clarify it and kind of give
yeah,
people this direction, is that our ascendant gives us kind of where it is we wish to show up because of the perceptions other people have of us.
yeah. It's what we consider our baseline, that first house of survival. So we think we
Yeah,
have to act that way. So it kind of drives our survival needs.
I love that. So we think we have to act that way because it drives our survival needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the midhaven is actually who we want to be, who
I
we
find.
want to show up as. It's kind of like our North Star, is what you're saying.
I find that's the case. And then, like I've said, you can take into consideration the North Node in that. And it could be different for everyone because, but that North Node is going to get hit throughout your lifetime over and over again. And I find it over and over again that North Node get hits. People change jobs. They,
Yeah.
especially if it's, a Uranus Pluto thing. And even a Saturn thing. The Saturn on the midheaven to me is it's time to take responsibility for who you want to be. And oftentimes you could be becoming the teacher.
Hello, Saturn, smack bang on my Virgo midhaven in the 10th house.
Yeah.
Absolutely like, hi, can I be the teacher and the guru, please?
Exactly. And how do I refine it?
Oh,
How do
I'm
I
loving
perfect it?
refining it. I'm like, get me wiser. I want to be wiser, wiser, wiser.
Yeah.
Look at my robes. Does that make me wiser?
Exactly right. I think looking the part is never a bad thing, and I think that can be very Virgo too. People talk about Libras liking the way they look, but Virgos, oh my God, Virgos are obsessed with
Yeah.
because it goes back to that to that perfect to have, which again, speaking of words, simply means finished, to get something to a point where it's actualized in its ideal nature. But we get caught up in the expectation of what should be perfect instead of allowing it to be perfect as it is now.
Absolutely. And this is,
Yeah.
I think this is the nuance that literally we're all treading at the moment. It is that tightrope that, I mean, you mentioned kind of these early 30s are now starting to kind of feel like the early 40s, you know, this speed in terms of this personal awakening about
Yeah.
their own internal dialogue, their own internal inquiry, like you said. And this nuance is like, how are we going to bring this forward? What are we going to do to, like you said, get practical, practice, bring the embodiment in, not get finished, because there is no fucking finished, but to still be that kind of idea that is not the advertising perfect, but is like
Yes.
the perfectness of what is at the moment in this time.
Yes.
And we know there's memes all over the internet about it, but it's true, because it's kind of like that's the lesson we're all in at the moment, isn't it? Accepting us for who we are right now in the perfectness of this moment, and
Yes.
yet still wanting to unfold even more.
Well, because we're in a physical body. So it points back to the being and the doing. So we become very present and accept where we are now. And I always love the Arthur Ashe quote, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And to me, that
So
encapsulates
Capricorn
the
practical.
yeah, and it encapsulates the perfection of it, which is to say, you have everything you need at the moment, so do it. And of course, there's this perceived deficits or lacks that we have in our brain, which speaks to that those expectations of what we should be, right? The shoulding on ourselves. Or we look at it and go, okay, there's a physical lack. So if there's a physical lack of something in our life, then we go after that. But we don't have to go after that with the story of lack. We can simply identify the fact that, okay, I need more information about this, or I require food and water and shelter. So we again keep it practical and go, and so when we're on this journey, of anyone out there who's a budding astrologer or intuitive or any of that stuff, like, you just continue to move forward in your practice, and the tools present, the information presents.
I love that. That is so key, isn't it? It's like when you trust and you're moving forward, the information does present itself. The
Mm-hmm.
right people, the right places, events. It's almost like this soul curriculum that is perfectly designed for each individual as you're
Mm-hmm.
walking along your life, just presents it. And if you meet it with, like you said, this self-inquiry, this curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
what's here
Yeah.
for me? Then there's this magic and this awe that can be created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, that curiosity is key, because we again, humans have a habit of thinking that they have it all, or they want to have it all, and things are always changing. There's a lot of variables, so
Yeah.
we don't arrive, really. There is no one arrival point. There's constant arrivals, and then you pick up from there and you go, okay, what's next, what's next, what's next,
Mm.
what's next.
Mm.
But again, it's not about the grasping for what's next. It's about the conscious recognition. So, because the grasping comes from the conditioning, the old us, the neediness of what we think we need to survive. It's just going, okay, it's time to do this now. This is a requirement, but it doesn't have to turn into the constant grasping. And I find that that's a big part of my teaching too, to people, because it really is about where you are. And if you have nothing, because I don't want to sound privileged, because I have parts of my life that maybe have been, but I've been poor as fuck and haven't been able to afford, doctor visits and all different types of things when I was sick and all of that. And all I had at the moment was my breath. All I had was being in that moment of suffering and going, okay, what do I do now? You know,
Mm.
and then getting out of my own way and then letting it present. And it did every time. And so, because I feel like because I'm so willing to show up and to ask the questions and be available to what comes without judgment, it propels me forward.
Mm. I love that. Being willing to show up.
And that's
And
really important. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like maybe there's a bit of a divide in kind of like the human collective, or should I say the spiritual collective at the moment,
Yeah.
where there's this kind of, oh, well, ask and it'll be given. You know, it's just going to be there for me. And yet there's this other part that is, but we're part of that. We get to show up too. We get to get out of our way. Kate just said they're getting out of your own way, you know,
Yeah.
recognition, actually being in co-creation, collaboration. We are creatives too. If we are made in the image of our maker, in source, if we are all the things that, you know, we profess to be and share memes about all day long, then we get to live in that. We get to live in that body. We get to live in that day to day. And I love that. It's like, you know, you get to trust in yourself and in what's showing up.
And I'm going to say a very Capricorn statement, which is there's magic in the mundane.
Oh, I know. I love that.
And
Every day I love that.
as Wise Wolf says here, you know, we have, you have to put in the work. But I prefer the term practice. I don't like the term work. To me is very patriarchal. It's very manifest destiny, all of that. Like, so I say you put in the practice. You show up every day and you don't set it off to the side. You don't go and, do something harmful to yourself, whether you binge drink one night, although I'm not going to judge that. You can do whatever the fuck you want and then wake up Saturday morning and go, I have to go to yoga. I'm like, because that kind of keeps you in the, it's like you never really maybe get very far because there's always this contention between what you think you need versus what can support you. So yeah, the willingness to show up and to do whatever is necessary and fulfill whatever the requirements are at any given moment. And not, and this again, Saturn ruling my sun, me being that, that practical person. I have enough Sag in my chart, enough Pisces to go, there's magic there if we look for it, because I get insights washing the dishes. Doing any number of different things in my life. And so every day you can wake up and make the choice that you will recognize the magic in the mundane, and things will arrive out of the blue.
Oh, I love that. I love that more than you will ever know. That is kind of how I live my life, literally the magic in the mundane. And what I would really love is kind of for us to share, for you to share, what does your practice look like, day to day?
I got this question recently, so let me back up and say I should say I have Saturn and Virgo square my Mercury. So that really is Saturn and Virgo there, magic in the mundane in conjunction with my Mercury. It's not conjunct, but in relationship to. Someone asked me what is my spiritual practice, and I say this is my answer to that. What is not my spiritual practice?
Oh, look at him killing it, everyone. He's like, what is not? I'm such a mundanely magical, mercurial man.
It's true. When she asked that, I was at a get together last weekend and I got that question and I paused because, like I normally do, when people ask me a question I haven't said out loud before, I paused and I said, what is my spiritual practice? And my thought was, what isn't at this point in my life? I mean, everything is my spiritual practice. Sitting here with you, being present, when I'll go to the grocery store and I'll stay present. If somebody triggers me because they're acting a fool, I'll stay present. recently, I'll say I've been dealing with a lot of grief. I think part of it's collective.
Yeah.
I think part of it is I don't think I gave myself permission to grieve the end of a relationship that I was in, because I thought that for 5 years, because I thought if I allowed myself to feel the intensity of the emotions, that I would go back to this person. So that's
Mm.
presenting. But it's also connected
Who's
to,
ever felt that, by the way?
right? But that's also connected to a story I created in my mind when I was a kid, because I was gay and was very lonely because I had no one to talk to. So I created this, basically this imaginary, you know, man in my head that I could be with, and had all these stories about it's us against the world, because I had no, talking about being seen and heard, there was no one on TV, there was no one, I had no one to talk to. So I had some books I had read, and so I created this story of that involved a lot of loneliness and longing as a
Mm.
kid, and had no one to share that with. And interestingly enough, it's popped up to resolve now. So that's become a major part of my practice recently. It's just paying attention to how what presents, and then, as you said, getting curious about it, being willing to show up, even if it's extremely painful, because I know I have to remind myself, I'm like, okay, Christian, yeah, this is really painful, but it's not going to kill you.
Yes.
Because it's
And the
from the
pain,
past. Yeah, it's from
yeah.
the past, and all you have to do is just look at it for what it is. Again, that practicality. Don't separate the narrative from it, the identity, which is, in a breakup, it's like, I need that person, I loved that person, I'm connected to that person, my life feels very empty without this person.
Mm.
um, so forth and so on, and then going, okay, and did you transfer the story from your childhood onto that person? And
Yeah.
yeah, and I had, and I think he transferred his child. We had a trauma bond, and he transferred
Yeah.
his story onto me,
A
and
true love trauma bond.
exactly, right. um and so we were, and I obviously have moved on in a lot of ways, but then I realized there was still some part of me, but also realizing that that was very connected to um, my childhood.
And I
So
think we all have that. We've all been in that place, haven't
absolutely,
we? It's
absolutely.
recognizing it.
That's always it, right? What you said right there, the recognition factor. And we might have to spiral through it a few times, because I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I've recognized this before. And but I have a habit of not finishing things, and I can finish small projects really well. And when I was a designer and people were waiting for me to get things finished, I got them finished because there was a lot of accountability around people.
Yeah.
But I've had a handful of long projects, that have been a decade in the works.
The
And
book.
the books, all of them, yeah, all of them books, not just one, but all of the books in some capacity have been there. And so, that's been difficult because I've had to show up, but also pointing it to a spiritual thing is resolving some of these narratives in my head, and telling new stories, telling different stories, because I choose to tell different stories, and recognizing the emotions for what they are, which I think is a huge part of the spiritual practice. Because sometimes, and I'll talk about this on Sunday in the class, but I don't always know what I'm thinking. I don't always know what I'm thinking. I don't always know why I feel the way I feel, but I know that I feel. And to me, feelings are facts because you feel
Oh
them.
my gosh, say that again. Look, I
Feelings are
don't always
facts.
know,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
don't always know what I'm thinking. I don't always know what I'm feeling. Or I
Well,
don't know what I'm
but I
thinking,
know
but I
that I
do know
am
what I'm
feeling.
feeling.
I
Yeah.
do know that I'm feeling. So I don't know what I'm thinking, but I do know what I'm feeling. And the feeling um, can point me to the thought in my head, to the
Yes.
story. And so it isn't, that goes back to the embodiment we were talking about. So I realize I've embodied the thought, and it's usually a thought from the past. coming out as an emotion. And so I'm like, okay, how am I feeling? Okay, I feel grief right now. Where's this story coming from? Am I repeating a story because I'm on a pattern loop, you know? And feeling that grief? My thought was, am I really grieving, or am I creating grieving because I'm addicted to the grieving?
Oh! Throw that down! It's like a WWF move. Am I really grieving, or am I just addicted to the feeling of grieving and now I'm feeding myself grief?
Exactly.
Oh my God, can we just get a hell yeah on the like emoji button? How many of us do that with all sorts of emotions? We're just like, oh my gosh, I
So
don't know
let's
if this
clarify
is
for people.
true.
Let's say feelings are facts, y'all. You feel what you feel. So, but what you think is not the fact
Yeah.
necessarily. Okay, so you feel the feeling. You feel it. When I feel grief, when I feel sadness, when I feel anger, I'm
It's
feeling it.
there. Yeah.
But the story in my head about the anger or the grief might be a lie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oftentimes it is. Oftentimes it's not true. That so we can follow the feelings, as I say.
Sinead, I actually sometimes miss the hurt of the
There
heartbreak.
you go. Think about it, y'all. How many songs are about
Sinead's a
heartbreak?
Capricorn too.
There you go. Well, it's true. Capricorns, yeah, Capricorns can definitely like the grief and the heartache, and combine that with some heavy Pisces, and you've got,
I had a Scorpio moon for
oh
that
yeah,
one.
you can add the Scorpio into it too, and you've got lots of longing and pining going on. But so going back to your question, if we narrow down that answer to what is my spiritual practice, it is changing the narratives. It is
Yes.
changing the conditioning. It is transforming the domestication of what I learned, what I think I need to do. Because going back to the gay thing, when I came out to my mother, and going back to that Cancer rising that we talked about earlier, and the nurturing and so forth, at the expense of my own health and well-being, what I found was, I learned that from my mother. And when I came out to my mother, one of the first things she said was, I want you to find a good man to take care of you. And I
Thanks,
was
Mom.
like, and my response to her now is, I am the man. Thank you.
Oh, like share.
So
Just
there's
like
my
share.
rewrite of the narrative, because I spent years looking for the man.
Yeah.
To
The
Now
man in
that's
the
not this.
mirror.
Yeah, and so that's not to say that I don't want the relationship or the connection or any of that still, but the way I'm approaching it has changed. Because
Yeah.
before it was very much so, I need this to take care of me, I need this to feel whole, I need this to feel safe, I need this to be my other half, I need this ... Because most of the narratives go back to some form of survival need.
So let me get this clear for everyone who is watching. And there's lots of hearts going off. There's lots of boom. Oh yeah, flipping the script. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I think the most powerful line you said there was, my spiritual practice is changing the narrative.
Yes.
And I think that is a line that, when we look at what is healing, the root is to be whole.
Yes.
What is being whole? It's understanding that the narratives that we're telling ourselves are coming from survival. And when we actually feel, like you said, my feelings are real, but the story that's creating the feelings might not be real. And so I get to be curious. I get to look at that story and inquire into whether this story is real, or am I just addicted to whatever cocktail of hormones is going on when I feel and think this way.
Exactly.
And there's my power point. That's my healing point there, that I get to change that to a narrative that I want to see show up in my reality.
And let's connect it to the embodiment, because
Yes.
we change. When we do that, we rewrite the neural pathways. We change the neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys? And so when we change the neural pathways, we change how our body responds to it. and it's done. And sometimes I'll say this: you don't have to rewrite the narrative in your brain as a thought. Sometimes what you can do, research shows, they used to call it fake it till you make it, is you can conjure that state of gratitude.
Yeah.
And you can smile, because smiling releases these endorphins and does things. Or for me, I work out a lot, or you can do the breath work, or, you know, you can do any of those things, and it will help to rewrite those narratives in your story. It's almost like some days when you get, it's this grace that when you get in the momentum of it, they just start to change. They just start because you're so there. And I question everything. I'm like, who is fucking talking? Who is this voice?
Yeah, shut up.
Some days, not today, Satan. I see you, and we ain't doing that, bitch.
We ain't going down to Georgia today, honey.
No, not at all. And I'm not, you know, and I'll talk about this Sunday too. I'm not bypassing it. I see it for what it is. I see it for what it is, and I choose differently.
So I love that. I see it for what it is, and I choose differently. And you know, one of my teachers taught me that the most powerful word in the English language is choice, because without choice, we don't have anything else. And once we understand how to use choice, we are incredibly powerful human beings.
Yeah. Well, here's the issue with most humans, is they don't use choice because they don't look at all the options. And they think they only have one or two choices. And so again, part of what I'm here to do is say, let's look at all the options. Let's be aware of everything. And so I had a client this week. I don't know if she's watching. I love it. I'll tell her story very quickly. So she had applied for some jobs. She got for two. And she said, but I think there's a third choice. Well, she was going to school and learning about herbs and stuff. And I laughed. I said, well, yeah, there is. It's this other thing you're creating. And then it blew her mind. She paused me and went, oh my God, that is the third choice. But what was funny was I said, there's still more for you to learn on it. So you got these jobs, so take the one that suits you the best now, and then continue to learn, and that third choice will unfold as you go forward, you know, and you'll know what to do when it's time. And I think that, you know, it is about being aware of the options, because then we can know what to choose and when to choose at that moment. So at the moment, it might only appear you have two options. There might be a best option right now, but there's other options that are in the works always, and always. It's always changing and transforming. So we can be aware of our future options as much as we can be aware of what we have now.
And allow ourselves to see those options. I think, you know, what you said just before that is we don't always know that we've got them because we don't allow ourselves to have the broadness of perspective, the depth of understanding that, like you said, possibility is everywhere. It's not just there's one or two choices. There is literally, you can create any possibility if you are open to it and creative enough and allowing enough to receive. And I love that you mentioned grace before, because I feel like the depth of gratitude that you can go to opens up the breadth of grace that is offered to you. And this is just like, if we could teach this to little kids, they would be on such a magical journey of creating and receiving and shifting through and being abundant, you know, genuinely, positively abundant in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, because what it would do is give those kids more options.
More choices. So I'm loving this. I mean, I think we could probably do like a whole series of these, to be perfectly honest. But what we're looking at here is we have, I don't know how long we get on Instagram. I think we get about an hour, do we?
Yeah, it's
So we,
sometimes, I think it's longer now, like an hour and a half. So we go over a little, it's okay. But
oh,
you
is
know,
it?
yeah, but
Well, it'll kick us out if it does.
it will.
But what I'd love to do, if you're up for it, is to maybe take a couple of questions from the audience, from
Sure.
those of you that are watching, and to throw in. I know that I mean, so far, so many powerful things. I love the well, basically, you're teaching around the ascendant and the midheaven. I love this, healing is changing the narrative and that we've all got this choice point. I
Well, if you
love
think about
that.
it, the ascendant and the midheaven are in a square.
Yes, they
Yeah,
are.
I mean, so you got to take the journey from here to here. Your
And what
ascension.
it is your ascension. And I think
Yeah.
this is kind of tie it all back into, okay, so we've kind of touched on and talked around kind of neuroscience, biology, this embodiment piece, this spiritual ascension, not bypassing the practice, and all of these kind of little bits in between. Let's kind of bring it all the way back to astrology now.
Yeah.
So you mentioned right at the beginning, astrology is a place for self-inquiry.
Yes.
If those people that are watching now are like, wow, this is really resonating with me. I definitely am addicted to some of those cocktails of like grief and anger or whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah.
What are the steps that they get to take now using astrology that will take them step by step into that unfolding that they can then create their own mundane practice with so that they can start to change the narrative of their thoughts and feelings to create their healing and holding?
Well, you simply start out, you run your chart and you start to investigate. I mean, that's, because again, it's so nuanced. So I can't say, look at this one thing because, you could look to see where Pluto sits in your chart because in the fourth house, you probably come from a handful of trauma. Um, I find people that have Scorpio in the 12th house usually have struggled with addiction or alcoholism or things like that. So again, there's all that nuance. So there's all these different things that, that people or they've had people around them that have had it. So I think you get investigatory, like you just and because I am in my work very trauma informed because my perception
Yeah.
that's part of the block. And to me trauma is just that conditioning. It really is the pattern, and it probably came from something that was abusive or in some way, whether that was direct physical abuse or neglect, from a parent
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. So so I say don't be afraid to look at your hurt, maybe is a good place to
Mm.
start. And in astrology you can look at those places where that is the case, sometimes, um and look at some of those marks. You can look at Saturn too in your chart. I always like to look and see where Saturn's sitting for people because that brings a big lesson. That brings a
Mm-hmm.
big it's funny, the kids that were born last January during the Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn, they're gonna blow some shit up in their life. They were born in the year of COVID. They're gonna have that's their trauma. That is their
Mm.
trauma is dealing with all of that stuff and the aftermath of that and the energy being born into that. But it becomes so I love this. Is choice a privilege, and how can astrology aid intersectionalism? Oh, we should answer that
Oh,
one before it goes up.
Emma!
So I
Emma
consider
always
myself
has to
a
bring in a good one.
I love that. So I consider myself very intersectional. I'm non-binary. I went through a time in my life where I was trans. I consider the transition. Um, and so I look at ableism and choice and privilege. I think yes, to some degree, choice can be perceived as privilege, because though some of us are born into certain circumstances where we don't have the same choices and we've been conditioned differently. And like for me, you know, I was not allowed to exist. My non-binariness was not allowed to exist. And I didn't
Mm.
have that choice as a kid, which is why I created these other narratives in my brain and gave myself the choice. But it was inside my head. And now what's happening in my life is I get the opportunity to choose. And if I don't see a choice, you know what? I don't care if it exists or not. I decide that I will create it. And I don't care who the fuck says I can or I can't. And so I create the, if we want to say create the privilege for myself, I create it for me. I create the choice because people aren't going to give it to us, guys.
Mm.
people
And
are
I love
not going to
that.
people are not going to give it to us. We are here to create it. And so if we lack those choices, if we lack that privilege, then I've learned for myself, no one was going to accept me in the role I wanted to be. So I had to step into the role for myself and accept it. And all the voices in my head and all the people saying things say, fuck it. Like I'm not allowed to exist and certain other people's narratives and ideas. And I'm going to exist. And I'm going to exist with all of the nuance, all the colors, all the pieces, because that we all have that. So I love the intersectional narrative is important right now because we're all fucking intersectional. If people are really honest with
Exactly.
themselves, they really are. And the privilege is conditioning. The privilege is and so I don't want to say I said I give myself the privilege, but I like the term of more I give myself the option, because privilege tends to point to an unconsciousness and not knowing that you have something that other people don't have, and it gets weaponized, you know,
I
without
love
them
that.
knowing. Without people don't even know they're weaponizing their own shit. And so for me, it's so I look at other people's privilege and I go, yeah, you have this, but what do I embody here? What do I have to offer? And that is my option. And showing up with all of our pieces, I think, is very important right now, because we give other people the option. Hey, they did that. They're doing this. Maybe I can do it.
Yeah.
Because if you're nuanced, if you don't fit into the binary, if you don't fit into what's considered the norm, then you're immediately marginalized. But what's interesting is the norm isn't growing. What's happening is the margins have always been there and the norm is getting smaller.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
what is considered intersectional is broadening, and the awareness of that, and allowing people to give them permission, because I've met a lot of people who say they live in the binary who don't, or who try and live there, who want to live there because it feels safe, who don't want to be intersectional because it's scary.
Or they're
And
not informed enough, they're not educated enough to hold themselves in that space.
but there
I
you
think
go. Yeah.
something I come across a lot is people want to be and they want to be informed, but they're afraid of putting their step into that place in case they get it wrong, in case they get, they get flack. Because the other thing is, part of the work that I do is that privilege exists, but it's also a perspective. What you believe privilege is might not be what I believe privilege is, and what you believe privilege is for you or for somebody else might actually be something that I think is privilege for you. So, there's this dynamic where we're bringing in what is my thought, what is my feeling, and what out there is telling me that what I'm thinking and feeling is a certain thing, is privilege, is not privilege, is choice, is not choice, is
Yeah.
uncomfortable, is educated. And I think we're all kind of walking through this mud at the moment, trying to find what's real, what's not, what have we
Yeah.
been told, and what are we creating. I love that. Like you said, I get to fucking create what it is that I am, and that might change day to day.
Yeah. Well, I'll say that at this point in my life, I very much so present as a cisgender male. But me in my trans and my femme and my I paved the way for this, because it's odd how, as I embraced those intersectional properties, that I was born into the world with, there's something, other things have emerged, and I
Mm,
was afraid for a long time to let it emerge, because I was like, I'm gonna look like the norm. I'm not. I'm gonna, all of these things, and I was like, but that's wherever you're headed, that's okay, and you're still you. But I
mm,
had to go through the process of embracing, and I think privilege, if we were to just narrow it down to one word, it's just unconsciousness. People aren't
mm,
aware of the fact that they that if you're born an attractive white male, you immediately have more privilege than anyone else on the planet. And
mm.
unfortunately, they are the most unconscious, I find. And so for me, I had to be born in a space and learn to navigate a space so that I could show up in this male body.
Mm,
And,
mm.
and I couldn't have done that before. So yeah.
It's interesting because, I'm in a different space where, we all already mentioned, and I'd love people to pop in the chat as well, where they believe that they have either had privilege unconsciously and have uncovered it, or they've moved into different choices, or they've experienced this in their life. We would love to hear in the chat what's landing for you in this discussion. Um,
And can I add
but
one point? Because they said,
yeah.
how can that aid in astrology? I think taking the binary out of it, I still consider Saturn to be very masculine in a lot of ways, but I think Neptune, I call Neptune the trans planet, because Neptune to
Oh.
me, hello, it was a fish. Neptune to me is non-binary. Venus is tended to be female. Mercury, I think, is a gay man.
Yeah, he's he's
you
he's
know?
he's very in and out, isn't he? He's like,
Exactly, mercurial and sassy. So I think Pluto is non-binary, actually. So
mm,
I think taking the binary out of astrology is helpful, and recognizing the fact that we don't have to gender everything, or if we do gender something, give it, like, look at it based on what's going on in the chart as the gender. Because let's face it, I mean, Saturn in Pisces, which we all know does not like being in Pisces, um levels out the gender of Saturn a little bit. you know?
it's interesting that we talk about that with astrology, because like I mentioned in our cover for the Capricorn full moon about the sun usually getting, the masculine,
Yes.
and
In
yet
certain cultures it's not, because it's life-giving.
absolutely, yeah. So it's the
Exactly.
maternal, it's the mother, it's this
And
absolute
we all
divine
know that
feminine.
an overbearing mother is hard to deal with. And the son can definitely be like an overbearing mother.
But it's also, we were discussing this kind of like, okay, so the moon is feminine, but what about the masculine moon? What about the moon being the reflection of the sun? What about the moon being the supporter of the sun? The one that holds the gravity in place, rather than the one that is the life giver, because actually it doesn't have light of its own. It
Mm-mm.
receives light and then reflects it back. And it's like there is an argument there somewhere
Well,
that the
that's a
moon could be
non-binary
masculine.
thing there.
Yeah.
It receives and reflects. That's masculine, feminine, if you put it within that binary. So yeah.
Yeah. It's an
Yeah.
interesting narrative shift, which is obviously what we're talking about this evening.
Yeah. I love, so we've got white men don't even need to be attracted to leverage privilege, and that's very true. Absolutely.
Mm.
I was thinking of the absolute top of it. If you're an attractive white male, like you can just do whatever, but definitely you don't even need to be attractive to be privileged. um so yeah, I
So
think,
drop in
yeah.
your questions, ladies and gentlemen. If you want Christian to answer your questions, we've got a few minutes.
Yeah.
You can see that he is a bright, witty Capricorn boy, and we'd love to hear about what is landing for you, what are the things that are going off in your mind, in your heart, in your feelings that have just tickle the code in you, awakened you, shift your perspective, but also your experiences of the Capricorn super full moon.
Oh yeah. Any questions you guys have, let's throw them at us. We have a little bit more time, as Mary Kate said. So we're here.
So,
So
so tell me, while we're waiting for people to pop some questions in, this Capricorn full moon, how are we to manage the energy that is coming through from that beautiful non-binary reflector?
so a lot of people are talking about this as being a healing moment. And so again, an opportunity um, to step into more wholeness. And to me, because it's Capricorn, it becomes very practical. Like I've said 1,000 times, that your healing is practical. Your healing gives you the opportunity to express all your pieces, and expressing all your pieces is just practical and a requirement for that authenticity and integrity that so many people seek in life. But I'll say this: Capricorn, to me, exalts the zodiac to a certain degree, because Capricorn is a finisher. Capricorn is, okay, let's get this. Let's it's a cardinal, so it initiates, but it's a weird cardinal, because it's like, okay, let's climb the mountain. Let's do, so it initiates it, but it also gets the job done. So I think whatever we've been holding on to, like I said, I hadn't finished my grief. Whatever you haven't finished emotionally, now's a great opportunity to finish, so that you can let that shit go. If you've been dragging around a dead fucking body, cut that bitch loose, put it in the ground, have a fucking funeral, cry, and then let that space, be spacious, and see what comes in.
Holy hallelujah. Holy hallelujah. I think that everyone is going to feel holy hallelujah with that, because who isn't dragging around a dead body? Who doesn't need to have a little funeral for whatever is going on that is just hanging around our aura, and taking away this powerful energy, like you said, that we can bring to our practice, and we can start creating from that void space. Let there be space for the new to come in. Let there be space.
Yes.
So
and what's the priority, guys? What's the priority? What's going to...
He's so Saturnian.
I know.
Surprised he hasn't got his whip out yet. Okay. So, what have we got? How do we know what career to pursue? Whoa, okay. That's a big one.
So, guys, in astrology, I always look at that midheaven in 10th house. I had someone ask me this recently. They wanted that. But so 6th house tends to be where you're making your living, right? Like your day to day. 10th house tends to be that long term. Again, 10th house is Capricorn. It's ruled by that. If you take everything out, of your birth chart, it's got that Capricorn and Saturn influence. So it really is to me, that's difficult to answer without a reading.
The chart.
Yeah. So you can get Mary Kate or I to support you in that. But I would say, let me say this. Look at what you love. Because the career tends to point to something that you enjoy, and that can sustain itself through the feeding of that joy and the gratitude of doing it. Because the career is not the job, okay? The career is not a job. We need to take that out. That's patriarchal. That's old school way of doing things, that the career and the job are the same thing. They are not. And so there's a great book Elizabeth Gilbert wrote called Big Magic, which is about getting curious and exploring these options. Actually, all the colors behind me are on
I
that
was just
book.
gonna
I
say
just
that
thought
is
about
the
it. It's
book.
like the cover of the
You're
book.
in the book cover.
Yeah, it is the book cover. And I didn't even know I was going to mention it. And in it, she invites you to explore. Okay,
Yeah.
so explore all the things you've loved, get curious about those things, and oftentimes I point back. I even did a video on it weeks ago. Look at what you loved as a child, because that will give you authenticity. That will, that, because as a child, even though you weren't fully conditioned yet, so your career, I always find people's career points to something that they would love to do.
Mm-hmm. If they're really happy in it, you know, I've found when I've looked back on people's charts and kind of what they've done in the past, there's always been, no matter how strange or discombobulated it might look to have different careers, there's always been a link and an underlying tone of what it is that they really enjoy to do.
Exactly.
That they, you know, they enjoy being with people or helping people or serving, or they enjoy being creative, or they enjoy being practical. You know, it might sound kind of um, quite big to say creative or helping, but actually, when you have a look at most careers, most careers are in those arenas. They're either serving something, creating something, or being present to create something else for someone else.
Yes.
Um, and you just get to color it with whatever it is that you really, really bloody love. And of course, like you said, Christian, you know, make it sustainable so you get some cash from it and you start to be in prosperity. And sometimes, like we both know, you know, following what you love doesn't always drop in and give you, you know, your riches straight away. You want to be devoted to your craft, devoted to the divine, devoted to what you came here to be, do, have, and create, and to just to shine. What's your mini mission, you know? And I think you find your mission through, like you said, what would you do? I know they ask this a lot, but what would you do if you weren't going to be paid for it? What's the thing that even if you won the lottery tomorrow, you'd still be doing because it's you?
Yeah. And I like to say this, the question you can ask yourself too is, what's the contribution?
Mm.
What's your contribution? I feel like, which is to say, what are you good at? Because if everyone did what they're good at in the world, everything would get done.
Yeah.
But we get so,
Quickly and
yes,
well.
we get so caught up in what we should be doing and what we think we need, and lots of shoulding everywhere. There's just piles of shoulds in everybody's life. To clean out the should.
Clean out the shed, honey.
Clean out the
So
should.
let's see what else we've got. Ah, the conversation has gifted me so much, really rich reflections. Thank you. Especially the recognition of feeling versus story and what power you assign. Yes. Oh gosh, we've got a sun and moon in Pisces. Sorry about ya. Guilty of dragging the dead body. We've got some healing happening, but also, have we got a question here? Ooh, we've also got just realized the man who was courting me last 2 months is a damning con man. So taking the cap moon to clean, purge, cleanse, and reorganize. Yay for the ending of Mercury retrograde and for
Good for
moving on.
you. See it for what it is. Good.
Yeah, I think Neptune retro is going to clear some of these illusions too. You need a chart reading. You've got two astrologers here. I met someone so out of my usual, and it's sensible and loving it. Sensible is good. We've got a Capricorn sun here with a Virgo moon, Sagittarius rising. Ooh, and learned Libra is your north node. Ooh, you have some at the end of that zodiac going on.
Yeah. So their chart is so if they're Libra, they said Libra North Node, not Midheaven.
Yeah, north node.
So someone has in the thing, Rebecca had asked, how do I utilize the supermoon to make to not make repeat mistakes?
Yeah.
I want to say you don't have to just use the energy of this moon. That's something that you want to do every day. So you want to, again, look at the narratives and you know, of what you think you need and how you're trying to get those needs fulfilled in your relationships, because the patterns are in direct proportion and correspondence to what you think you need. So
Mm.
if you're looking for that outside of yourself in some capacity, then you will repeat the patterns because you'll expect someone to fulfill it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Golden, golden. I know it's the cliche again, though, isn't it? It's like all you've ever wanted is within you. All
Well,
you need is within you.
as I say, cliches hold invincible truths. That is why they are
Ah!
cliches.
I have to say, you know, we've got some gold nuggets, yes. And we've got some really, really beautiful kind of reflections here as well. Shineady's saying, get me a stage. You've got enough of a stage, darling. Shineady, by the way, is my sister.
Yay. So
Let me,
Cameron
as it,
said thoughts on the imminent Chiron retrograde.
ooh, yeah.
I haven't looked at it yet. Um, Again, every retrograde is review, renew, opportunity for all those things. Again, the cliche, all of that. Chiron being the wounded healer, for those that don't know, um, is it's an opportunity for healing. Again, that's another thing you can look at in your chart if you're looking for wounds, or what your purpose might be. One of my sessions
Mm,
last week, the Chiron was conjunct her sun, so and it was in Leo. So I think a Chiron retrograde is always going to be about have you finished it? Have you healed? Have you done all the things? You know, I have to look at what aspects it's going to hit because I haven't done that yet. I know right now
mm.
it's square my Sun, my Mars, and my ascendant.
That's probably why you haven't looked at it yet.
So it's gonna keep doing that fun. And it's in my 10th house, so healing all that career stuff. So
There's some big things coming for you, though. There's some big things
oh
coming for you.
yeah, Jupiter's about to go over the midheaven, and Saturn's gonna
Mm.
follow up and finish that out in the next 2 years. So I feel it. But I feel it, guys, that there's just when because we got multiple retrogrades going on this summer, like we often do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another opportunity to look at where the wounds are and
Mm-hmm.
to transform them. And you want to look at where they are in your chart. So for
Yeah.
me, because Chiron's in my 10th house, it's probably going to bring me more. It's probably going to bring me more clients because that seems to be what it's been doing.
Which is ideal and perfect because you know you've moved, you're ready, settling, you're back in a space of being nurtured, and you know I think you are definitely shining. You know, this Capricorn full moon, I've felt your energy since we connected, like very, very strongly, like pulsing this new just new elevated self. And you know we've kind of dropped in the book or the books a few times in this conversation, but what I really want to encourage everyone to do is to, if you're not already following the country clairvoyant and you're not already sharing his memes all over Instagram, then please get on there and follow him, because not only is he a fantastic astrologer with a brilliant perspective, a unique perspective on the zodiac chart, a mean and witty sense of humor, he has also got a great story, a great, I don't want to give too much of it away, but a brilliant story, a novel that is to be birthed very soon. Something that has been a lifelong, or at least kind of like an adult long.
You're right, lifelong. It was set up when I was a kid.
Mm.
Everything I did was set up as a child.
Ain't it all, honey?
I know
Ain't
I
it
can't get
all?
away from it. I can't get away from it.
So I have to say thank you. I have to
Thank you.
say a massive, massive thank you to you for coming on and for sharing your heart with such generosity. And I'm sure, like, Aloha from Rhonda saying there's going to be lots of readings getting booked. And also share before we close our beautiful conversation about Sunday and about other possible workshops that are coming up.
Yeah, so this Sunday, I'm teaching a class called Your Word is Your Wand, and it's going to be about recognizing how our thoughts influence us and our emotions. So, because I can't just look at it from one side. There again, it's all connected. And this is the first, hopefully, of many. Right now, I like the idea of teaching some live classes, so people have more access to me. So we're doing that this Sunday. It's at 2. You can go to my website, thecountryclairvoyant.com, under Mercantile Classes, or you can go to Instagram on the link tree, and it'll be there. I'll close it tomorrow at midnight. So, you know, just so there's, you know, so you have another day and a half to get it. And then, and it's only $33, so it's not super expensive. And then
it is a bonus. It is, if you're not doing it, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You've got to go in there.
And then to our conversation, we're going to talk about Mercury placements too. So I asked everyone to run their chart, just to, you know, we're going to go over some of, because Mercury can point to our thought process, as you know, in that 3rd house. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I wanted to in how we communicate. So we'll talk about that. It says, well, this class addressed how to not be a dumbass when you open your mouth. So, the Miller Gene, I'm going to ask you, are you Mercury and Sag?
I am.
Same here. Mercury and Sag. Insert foot into mouth.
Place foot here.
Exactly. So, yeah. So, yes, we'll talk a little bit about that. Absolutely. And then, yeah, you know, and then we'll launch from there. We'll see how, I know the next is going to be a relationship class, but I through your inspiration, I'm going to work on maybe looking how to maybe look at the houses from a different perspective and start there for astrology. And so we'll see. Yeah, I figured, why not? If I'm going to be teaching, and I'll be launching, for those who don't know, You Are Here on Purpose is the podcast I'll be launching in a couple weeks. I keep saying that. I feel like life has been moving. There's been a lot of moving parts, so I haven't gotten it launched yet. But it's coming. So You Are Here on Purpose. It's on Instagram. You can go follow me there too. That'll be a little more talks like this. I won't be interviewing anyone. That's my 2nd book, a spirituality book. So it'll be proof of concept. So I'll just be reading excerpts from there and talking about, you know, different things. And it'll be about anywhere from 5 to 30-minute little things. So yeah, so those are the things I'm working on right now. So, and always available for readings. So
yeah, and you know, you got to get reading with him. It's just so much fun and insightful. And I have to say thank you so much from across the pond.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure. I have a feeling this may not be the last time we have our Mercury and Sagittarius party. And I just, like I say, I encourage everyone to get following you and
thank you
to sign on to that class.
Thank you.
And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Healing is the new high. I mean,
exactly.
Look how high we get.
I know. So you're gonna save this, right? We're gonna save it for everybody because I'll post it in my stories.
You gotta tell me how to do the saving.
So when we close out, it'll give you an option. Save to you can save to your Instagram TV. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So go
we'll do a hell load of tagging.
Yeah, and then
tagging.
Then you can put it in your stories, tag me, I'll throw it in my stories, and we'll get people watching it. And hopefully you'll get some new followers too.
I'll tell you, this has been so rich, so fun, and I think this is going to be something that people get to watch over and over again. There is so many golden nuggets in there, and delivered with so much fun and so much gratitude and grace, honey.
Yes.
So much gratitude and grace.
Thank you, darling. All right, guys.
I love you.
Enjoy your weekend. It was great. Thank you, Kate. Much love. Much love.
Much love to you. Bye-bye, honey.
Bye.
Bye.